Come on. Oh, there we go. It's not showing any video, which is concerning. Oh, there we go.
All right. I see it. Let's go.
Alrighty, let's get it. Alrighty, Kieran.
Welcome back to another episode of the Beyond the Stat podcast. I believe this is episode 24, and it is 2024. So we're going to talk about the ACC in 2024. Last week, we promised after our SEC deep dive that we'd do a deep dive for each of the conferences. This week, the All Coast Conference is up for on the chopping block, in the hot seat, so to speak. And we're doing the same thing we did last week. Talk about the tiers of the conference, who can contend, who's a champion, and who is not so great. Kirtan, throw up the graphic. Let's get started, man.
Alrighty, graphic is on in 3, 2, 1.
All right, so yes, this is the same graphic we used last time, but the logos have changed.
Yep.
That top quality editing you expect. So, starting off with the Boston College Eagles, they're they're all right, but they're not great. So they are really kind of a middle of the pack team for me. And Kirtan forgot to rename the things, and this is
Yep,
streaming
my bad,
live to
guys.
YouTube. So he's gonna fix that. But
Our
sometimes we
champion.
all make mistakes. And
Yes.
while he fixes that, I'm talking about Boston College. So Boston College has really been kind of focusing on in-state recruiting lately. They don't have a whole lot of guys on campus yet, but they're working on keeping more of the talent that is in that area, in that kind of New England area, home. That's what they're working on, keeping it from going to Miami, from going to North Carolina, from going to Penn State, from going to schools that aren't in that area. And that's been a big focus of Bill O'Brien and his coaching staff. But they've still got a lot of work to do in terms of actually playing football. And as a result, they're not really in any place to contend for the ACC title, to contend for the playoffs, and it would be an impressive year if they make a bowl. Now, that is kind of the expectation for them, and that's why they're kind of in the middle of the pack tier. I don't think they're quite a bottom feeder, just because they're a good team. They know what they're doing and they know where their identity is going to go, especially offensively, but they just haven't quite put in all of the work and gotten all of the players it's going to take to get there. So it's a Boston College. It's a hard team to rate, but we've put them in the middle because we think a bowl game is certainly achievable, but it would be an achievement for them because their schedule is actually quite rough. They play Florida State. They play a really rough out of conference schedule, which is characteristic of the ACC, but they belong in the middle of the pack. So now we're going to talk about Kirtan, give me your Boston College scoop.
Well, I love Boston College because I love the mascot. I love everything about it. I think that they're gonna be well. I like to base my ratings off of not just necessarily the team, but I like to look at the conference play which they're gonna be in. So first off, I think you have some untouchables right now, and that's of course Florida State, Clemson, Miami. I feel like they're almost untouchable come the season. I really don't see anyone matching them in skill. Then you have some people that you know they're going to be decent at the game. You can say NC State will be decent. A couple teams will be decent. I know Notre Dame's in this list. Don't mind them because they're just doing what they're doing. Um,
Yeah, they don't exist. It's just because
they're the
non-football, it's relevant.
artificial ACC team.
Yes.
And we wanted to put them somewhere, so I put them in the list. Um, I feel like Boston College is the middle of the pack team because they have a good squad, a very solid squad. They are needing to reinforce the air passing because they really don't have a passing game established. But I don't think, especially looking at their schedule this season, having to play Louisville, going to play Florida State to open the year, it's a rough schedule, and I feel like they're not going to be able to be the best team. Not necessarily going to be 8 in conference play, but they're definitely going to be right there in the middle. So that's all I got to say for Boston College. Kieran, hit us with your Cal
Yeah.
reasons why.
So Cal is very. I am sad for Cal. I am very sad for the Golden Bears because they didn't ask for this. They didn't start it. They didn't start the imminent destruction of the Pac 12, but they are certainly suffering from it, having to go all the way across the country multiple times. And that is, oh, another fun stat. I know I've already talked about this, but I also recently found out that Cal will travel less miles than I believe it was. There are only 6 or maybe it was 8 NFL teams that travel more miles than Cal, and they play
Dang.
more road games, and the groups are overall more spread out. So that's a little bit of a crazy stat. Cal goes in the middle of the pack with Boston College because solid team really is not going to break into contender territory though.
Yeah. Um, I think they are definitely another solid team, and they are going to do something special. They have a really solid offensive line. They have a established game on the ground. It's just when you think ACC, you think, well, at least I personally think flashiness. I like to see the grit. And a lot of these teams, like I named previously, are mostly air focused. I mean, take Syracuse, for instance. They just reinforced their offense again by putting in Kyle McCord, who, of course, we know came from Ohio State. And so, with a high flying offense like most of these ACC teams, Notre Dame included now, um, you need to also match skill for skill. You have to go flame for flame, essentially, fire for fire, just match firepower. And I don't think Cal is able to do that. I think that they're just an established team. They come straight from the Pac-12. It's going to be like a awakening year. Of course, I feel so bad for all these Pac-12 teams because you don't know what you've gotten yourself into. But I definitely think they're going to be doing not as bad, but they're just not going to live up to expectations. And for that reason, sadly, they must fall into the middle of the pack. Honestly, towards the bottom of the pack.
Yeah. So up next, you have a team who, if they play their cards right, if they're able to make a couple adjustments, get some higher profile play, especially out of the quarterback position, they could very much be a contender. But we're putting them in champions because Clemson, they've run the ACC for quite a while now. Now that Florida State's back, the room's starting to heat up a little bit. But if Maffa is solid, they're running back, and if Cade Klubnik can take his play up a level, Clemson's still in it. And Dabo Sweetie's going to do it the way Dabo wants to do it. And that's honorable. I can respect that. And Clemson has always been a champion under Dabo. And I think they will continue to be this year, even if I don't have them winning the league.
Yeah. The only part I'm gonna disagree in that is that the fact that Dabo is like I honor him too. Like Kieran said, we respect him for playing his football his way. He doesn't want to take that way, but that's not how football is played anymore. Look, I get it. I know if some the famous quote that I love is if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But in this case, you have something broken that you still haven't fixed, or something that you've actually ignored, and that is, of course, transfer portal. There's no need to talk about it a million times over, but he is not playing to the full potential that Clemson could be. He is not bringing in the talent that Clemson could be bringing in, and that's why he is on the. That's why we put him in the champions and kind of contenders. We were like having a debate on this because deep down we know if Cade Klubnik can finally play up to the level, then this team is automatically a championship roster. Phil Maffa is probably one of the best players at his position by far, especially in the ACC. He might be all ACC first team. You have Wesco, who we're going to talk about later, the freshman wide receiver, who's hella fast and is supposed to be a immediate impact player. But if you play your cards right, and this is what we're going on the team's best performance, you will be sitting right here at the champions number one. And so we're going to leave you there because we do have another team in mind, though, who might steal it from you. Anyways, Syracuse, Orange, Kieran.
Yeah, so Syracuse, it's another middle of the pack team. Obviously, they have added Kyle McCord, but I realistically don't know how much better they're going to be. He struggled at Ohio State. Ohio State is in the doldrums of quarterback play. At some point in the Big Ten episode, we will have a conversation about that. We haven't been completely ignoring it. But yeah, that's kind of where Syracuse is, middle of the pack. A solid team, but leaves something to be desired.
Yeah. What else is there to be said about Syracuse? I mean, Kieran hit the nail on the head with the fact that Syracuse right now, they're going through it. New quarterback, Kyle McCord, spoke about this earlier. He was brought in from Ohio State to basically reinvent this offense, bring more life to it, bring a new passing scheme to it. But Kyle McCord's only here because Kyle McCord sucked in the Big Ten. No offense to Kyle McCord. They did have an unbelievable season, but how many times can you lose to Michigan before you finally say, maybe I'm the problem? And I think he hit one of those realization moments in the nick of time because he realized, like, oh, I am the problem in the end. Um, the good thing is that they're a very experienced team. They know what to expect. They have players that are going to be instant impacts, but I mean, it's Syracuse at the end of the day. They're not going to be able to take over some of the teams that we have listed to come. So for that reason, they're going to be sitting at the middle of the pack.
Yeah, so next we have perhaps my favorite kind of out of the box team in college football, the Dukies. Um, I love them. I love Duke. I think they're really something special. I'm very sad Riley Leonard left. Also very sad that Mike Elko left. But they've got Manny Diaz. I think they have another chance. They're kind of flirting with spoilers. Duke to me is always dangerous. They played the spoiler last year in dramatic fashion. So I want to put them in spoilers, but I think they're more deserved middle of the pack.
Yeah. Um, what else can be said about them? The good thing is that they have a whole new offense to reinvent. We have to also keep that in mind. Malik Murphy, the transfer out of UT, is going over to Duke alongside Manny Diaz. Again, they did have big losses in Mike Elko, but honestly, I don't think Mike Elko really cares at this moment because he's living it up at the A&M Aggies, and I think he'd much rather be there than in Duke. Um, some of the strengths they have right now, their wide receiver core. Wide receiver core is young, talented, everything to love about them. Same thing with the secondary and defensive tackle areas. Just a solid roster. You should be well set for the next season. But again, like I said, new quarterback, Malik Murphy. How is he going to fare? How is he going to do against the new line with the new line? Um, that's some stuff to keep into consideration. And then lastly, the receivers I talk about, they're young. It's a good core, but how far down can you go in that receiver like depth almost? Because you only have you're a very top heavy team. You have, I believe, two or three guys that are outstanding, but you really don't have flashes from anyone else. So for that reason, we have them at the middle of the pack.
Yeah. So now we move to, I wouldn't say they're Clemson's only rival, but I think they're the only team that has the pedigree to rival Clemson, the Florida State Seminoles. Now, they've got Patrick Payton back. They've got pieces, and they will be able to replace. But the question for me is, did they make the right choice? I personally think the answer is more likely than not, no. But they have DJ Uyunglele. That, to me, is what could doom their season. And I don't like DJ Uyunglele as much as I like the other transfer quarterbacks and the other quarterbacks in the ACC. I would say, at best, he is fourth. And at worst, he could even fall sixth, seventh, eighth in the ACC. And I don't think that's an unpopular or unfair opinion. He's got several quarterbacks ahead of him. And if he can elevate his play, Florida State can win the ACC. But if he can't, maybe they're not able to. But they still definitely belong in champions because we at least will give them a shot at the championship, even if the college football playoff committee didn't.
Yeah. And just to reinforce Kieran's decision and my decision on why Florida State should actually be up here, actually probably around, if I had to switch them around like that, probably. The reason for this is, I mean, it can almost be broken down into 5 things. First thing, DJ Uyunglele, if he plays with anger, if he says, you know what, Clemson, you try to get rid of me, you put Kate Klubnik in for me, this is my revenge story. I honestly don't see a realm where Clemson can even come close. I feel like he's going to put the pedal to the metal and call it a day. Same thing with the entire Florida State team. I mean, how can you feel about being snubbed out of the playoffs this year? Like, that's got to put almost like a burning hole in your body to where you just want carnage. You just want to rip up these teams and prove to the committee that you want to see the strongest of the strongest. We are them. Uh, Other things, like I said, DJ needs to play well. Your offensive line is great right now. Both your offense and defense are really making strolls. They've been considered to have a weak offensive line for years past, but now they've developed into a very strong. And if DJ Williams can get more protection in the pocket, we've seen him at Clemson when he doesn't get that much, he gets overwhelmed, bad decision. More pocket time equals better passes. Lastly, defense. You can play such a smash mouth defense, and that's what happened against Louisville. That you just need to not just be relentless. Just like you played against Louisville, stop the run, play smash mouth, just go pedal to the metal. You will win the champion by far. So yeah, if we had to pick, I believe both me and Karen would agree that Florida State should be the favorites going into the ACC to win it all. Why? Who would you say?
Miami. But that's not relevant. We're going to talk about our first spoiler. So, Georgia Tech. The reason I've elevated them a little bit is because they played the spoiler last year in dramatic fashion. They beat Miami, and they're always dangerous. They scared the crap out of Georgia, but I think they have that little bit more. I think Haynes King can extract a slightly more explosive offense. Their defense can play better, especially up front. Matching up with those teams just a little bit better along the line of scrimmage will lead to increased opportunities for them to play the spoiler. And they always will have that game against Georgia, the old-fashioned hate or whatever the heck y'all call it. That they will always have that chance to be the spoiler. And they've got that chance in conference, too. So that's why Georgia Tech is the ultimate spoiler for me.
Yeah. And I'm just taking a look at their schedule right now, and it's very, very winnable. I mean, games against Syracuse, Georgia State. Again, you do have to play Seminoles come August, but I feel like you have a very favorable schedule that everyone would like to see. You have wins against Duke, you have a win against Louisville, UNC. They are all winnable games for you, and you didn't do horrible last year. I mean, last year, of course, you did have some big losses, but this year you could definitely have a turn up year, play better. You saw what happened against Miami. Again, I am going to chalk that literally up to that being a fluke, and in a million years, you would never snap. You never punt that ball. You just let the clock run down. You just run the ball the entire time. But I do think Georgia Tech is going to be a good team. They do always play well against Georgia. They always rise to the occasion. So I do think that they are going to make it to the cusp, but they're not going to be a contender, sadly. They will be right here. Alrighty, moving on, we have the NC State. NC State. NC State.
So they have a chance. They're another spoiler for me. So they're got a quarterback from Coastal Carolina who transferred in. His name is Grayson McCall. They have enough pieces to be dangerous. They lost Peyton Wilson to the draft. They lost a couple of other big key players to the draft, but they're going to replace on defense. That wolf pack is always there. They're always going to be aggressive. And I think their play style has always been well suited to the ACC. They have a shot at contenders. They're almost a contender, but I think that they're going to recess maybe just a tiny bit this year, Hopefully, offense will be better, but I do think defense will be worse. But I think they still can play the spoiler and maybe win a game against a much bigger, more with an opponent with a more solid roster.
Yeah, and Kieran said it. They got a new transfer quarterback, which would be great. Every time they match up against any of these teams, including Clemson, including Florida State, it's always a good game to watch because their way of football really plays favorite to the ACC. Hopefully, they're going to develop a better offense, so they're going to be able to probably stay close in some of these games that might be considered getting out of hand. But yeah, I feel like it's a fair rating to put them at spoilers. They're definitely going to be a little bit higher than all the pack. They're going to be a solid team. Honestly, I think they'd be more of a spoiler than Georgia Tech. And they're going to be one of the teams you got to look out for maybe an upset week come Clemson, come Florida State, come Miami.
Yep.
Alrighty. Moving on, we have our pick. Both me and Kieran have selected this team up next to win the entire ACC.
Mm-hmm.
Kieran, give us a reason why you put Pittsburgh in champions.
You know, I think it's time they won something. And even winning a fake tier prediction that doesn't really matter and probably won't affect any games on Saturdays would be a victory for Pitt because they have not had many. But I'm not going to give them that victory. They belong in bottom feeders. I'm sorry, Pitt. Get better. Get better football players. It's like that. I know y'all have all seen that thing with that coach about complaining about his team after a loss. But that's what Pitt is. They're not great. They have some difference makers. Their D-line core is much improved. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Pitt is the best team in the ACC this year. But I don't think they can break out of that tier. I think they're a little bit stuck in the bad spots of their conference. And I don't think they can break that wall, break that barrier. But that's kind of why they got to be at the bottom.
Yeah. Another reason why Pitt is at the bottom is just, I think Kieran said it. It's the idea that Pittsburgh just doesn't have the talent in the building because you need something to build a base off of, and I don't think Pittsburgh is getting as much respect as people believe. Like or they're just not getting respect from players just to come play over there because a lot of people don't want to play in Pittsburgh. They don't see any upsides to it, any reason to stay. So like right now, all they were able to get was Eli Holstein. He was the quarterback that came from the portal, but luckily they have returners and Nate Yarnell who's going to come back. But I mean, Pittsburgh. Here's the stats for Pittsburgh last season. It was only 20 points a game, like 31%. I think 31% 31.8% conversion rate on a third down. That means they're getting one every 3 third downs to actually convert, which is horrible. That means in 3 drives they're only converting 1 third down. It's just not good to see. And if anyone out there got to see the meme that I did, the one where it's Sweet Caroline, go. I forgot what it was. Something Pitt. But the new one is Eat Shit Pitt.
That's always been the thing. That's been the thing for a while.
Gotta love it, man. I just started realizing that.
I will admit that we here on the Beyond the Stat podcast are perhaps the biggest fans of the West Virginia Pitt rivalry that have ever graced this earth. I love it. It is a brilliant game. And yes, that song is something special.
Go Pitt, eat shit, eat shit.
All right. Kirtan's having too much fun. Someone gave him, I don't know what they gave him. But we're moving on to the Ponies. They were once known as but now they're the ACC. They're going to wear the little all-coast conference, come from Texas, and I don't know what's going on. But I think they're going to be in the middle of the pack. They have a solid roster. They've struggled against Group of 5 competition, but now they're going to have a lot of Group of 5 competition. Certainly, their win total is definitely lower than it was last year with good reason. But I still think they can be in the middle of the pack, mostly because I cannot put SMU with Pitt.
Yeah. Um, the good thing that they have is they just came off of winning. Oh, I don't want to get the conference wrong. USA, I want to say they just came from. May or may not have got that right or wrong, but I know that they won their conference last year. That's why they made this big of a change. The only you gotta love college football, man. All these teams, Atlantic Coast, and then you have Stanford, you have Pittsburgh, you have Dallas, Texas. Just it's a very interesting setup that the Atlantic Conference has right now. Um, Definitely not Atlantic Coast anymore. But, anyways, SMU had a great season last year. They're poised to have another one this year. I think they're going to actually do better than a lot of people think. Preston Stone has been considered but widely as one of the better quarterbacks in the league. It's just, I think Kieran got it right. You didn't play that much Power 5 football last year, and so you don't really know what to expect come season time. And now you're going to be in this ACC filled with basically all is Power 5, and you're going to have to learn the hard way what football really is. So, have fun with that. Anyways, I think they're going to be better than what people expect. They're just going to be maybe at the top middle of the pack. I honestly see them making a contender push. Anyways, moving on. We have probably the most academic prestigious school in all of the FBS field, the Stanford Cardinals. Karen, what do we know about them?
That they're not going to be very good at football, but they will be good at law degrees. So, Stanford, if you're saying this, we do still love you. I have a Stanford coffee mug. Perhaps it will make an appearance on the shelf behind me at some point. But Stanford, yeah, they're lacking in a lot of departments, the biggest one being football players. They have what to me is a solid foundation to build off of. But moving from, again, where is Stanford? California. Where is California? The West Coast.
Yeah.
Where is what conference are they in? The West Coast Conference? No. They're in the Atlantic Coast Conference. It's a lot of very unfamiliar competition. I bet most South Carolina, or my bad, not South Carolina, Stanford coaches had never watched teams like North Carolina, teams like Syracuse, teams like Boston College. I don't think they've ever dug into that field before, but now they have to. And that will be a very interesting and perhaps shocking experience for the Stanford Cardinals. But yeah, they've got to be in a bottom feeder. I'm sorry. It's just not there.
Yeah. As with all academic focused schools, they're known to not produce football talent. I mean, Duke even is the same in the middle of the pack. If you're an academically prestigious school, kids go there for the academics. It's more or less known. This is going to sound a little bit stereotypical, but nerdy kids are not great at sports, and nerdy kids plan to stick to academics over athletics. So it makes sense that Stanford's here. Of course, the smartest kids probably in this entire list that we'll ever do are obviously not going to be great at football. That's the bottom line. I mean, you do have some promising points, but just I was looking at some of the stats. Like you have total plays from last year. You only had like 838. Let's see. Only your completion percentage was 425 passes complete, 233 off. So that's not even a 50% completion rate for your entire team. Granted, that was with 10 picks, by the way. Um, yeah, I mean, it's just not great. Your third down conversion percentage was also 36.1%. Just pitiful. You're kind of in the same boat with Pittsburgh,
Pitiful.
so
Get it?
yeah, yeah,
Pitiful? Because
yeah,
Pitt.
yeah. Both of y'all convert 1 in 3 chances, 1 in 3 third downs. It's just it. Like I said, pitiful, just like Pitt. You know what? Actually, I'll do that. But yes, moving on, we have the Hurricanes, the surprise team, if not the favorites.
Oh, that's good. That's great. I can't argue with that. The mid episode tier change, but yeah, Miami. So I love Miami. I love some good murder ball. Hopefully, metaphorically for Miami, it's more often literally. But they have a good team this year. They've got a dog in Ruben Baines, who we'll talk about later. But Miami, to me, they're my favorite to win the ACC. I picked them to win the ACC. I think they just have a little more oomph. Mario Cristobal's seat is starting to get a little toasty. Maybe he turned his car seater up a little, car seat heater. My God,
Seat
up a
heater.
little too high, and that's where he is right now. And as a result, he is going to coach with just a little bit extra, and his team is going to play with just a little bit extra. Obviously, Cam Ward, weapons everywhere. Don't think they could be stopped. So
Yeah.
yeah, Miami. We're not putting them in champions because recently they've been bad, and I think a lot of people still don't quite have that leap in Mario Cristobal and faith in him and trust in him. I think he's going to make it this year, but I think they're certainly a contender.
Yeah. And I think Miami's riding the wave, but um they're doing really good. They're gonna get back to the glory days when they had Ray Lewis, Ed Reed, The Rock. I don't know if you can consider him a good day, but they had The Rock. They're getting back to it. The reason why I feel like Miami's gonna be such a strong team is that they are not a top heavy talent. They had 26 commits last year, plus many movements in the transfer portal, including Cameron Ward, and they're just a very deep. They have such a deep roster that they're able to make changes. They're almost playing to an SEC. They're trying to almost build an SEC here, and the fact that Georgia, Bama, all of the top teams that you can think of, they all have these insanely deep rosters with all this insane talent that they can bring to the table. And I feel like that's going to be Miami this year. They're going to come back, probably looking for an ACC win, trying to get into the game, and are definitely probably going to be even making a playoff push. And that's why we have them sitting in contenders. We don't think that they're going to be able to topple Florida State, Clemson. We don't think that they can play up to their level just quite yet. But this is where we think they should be for right now. The Utes.
Yeah. So moving on from cover two to Louisville. So the Cardinals, they've proven themselves to be an incredibly tough team. Obviously, making the conference championship last year, they've had issues with offense, but it's looking like that's going to be better this year. So I think they also belong in the contender tier. You're saying, Kieran, how can you put Louisville and Miami in the same tier? Well, I think that Louisville is also very much a contender. I think Miami is certainly a much better team than them. It has overall the best roster, but I don't have that faith in all the little things at Miami, whereas I have that in Louisville because they've put themselves there and the stage has not been too big for them. So that's why Louisville is also going in contenders.
Yeah,
Now,
and
yeah.
yeah, let me just. I'll quickly put this in. Louisville is always a competitive team in the ACC. Like, don't let these other teams fool you that we've been mentioning. Oh, Florida State, insanely strong defense, made a playoff push last year. Clemson, blue blood of the college football league, deserve to always be at the contenders. Miami, back on the rise. Louisville is consistently putting out great talent on the field and is consistently fighting for the ACC. What's my best and synonym I can put them? Penn State. They are the Penn States of the ACC. They're not usually picked as the favorites. Relatively, they're the third or the fourth pick, but they are always up there, always giving a good fight. And of course, we saw what happened last year. They put the hurting on Florida State for a little bit. But luckily, Florida State was able to pull off at the end in the ACC championship game. So they finished second last year. We're expecting them to do similar work this year, just maybe not to the level of Clemson and Miami.
Yeah. So next up is a team that Kirtan really likes for some reason, and that I think that they've lost just a little bit too much. They've got Amari and Hampton back, and I'm talking, of course, about the Tar Heels, or as they are known around here, the Fighting Mac Browns. So I think they're a spoiler. I think they certainly have spoiler potential. If they set their run game on you, it could be a 2023 Auburn type situation where they're able to run for enough yards to keep themselves in it and really scare the pants out of a higher team that was favored going in and thought it was going to be a relatively easy win. Now, they fought last year, they fought for wins, but they kind of got sunk and got upset a bunch, and that's what sunk their season. I think they could do just a little better this year, maybe, but I think I still have to put them in spoilers because I don't really see them contending for the title.
Yeah. Okay, so this is the reason why I am very hyped about this team. Of course, you don't have um what's his name?
Drake
Drake
May?
May anymore. Yeah. Drake May was one of the most, I have to say, one of the most influential and probably what's a good word for him? Impactful players that you've had in the recent years. But you still have a lot of talent coming back. Look, you lost Drake May, you lost Tez Walker, but Tez Walker, everyone's like, wow, he's a very insane talent, went to the NFL. Tez Walker wasn't the leading receiver last year. And that was actually J.J. Jones, which a lot of people forget. And J.J. Jones is coming back for another year. He is looking to probably make waves, probably look to get back to the NFL draft, but that's a very promising sign. You got the Troy starting quarterback to transfer into UNC to fill the vacant gap of Drake May. Wow, I'm really stumbling on this guy's name. He's a famous rapper too. It's crazy. Um, but yeah, and then what's another thing I can talk about? I guess I can say their offensive line. Not great in the pass protection. Drake May was under constant pressure, but their running game is relatively strong. They're able to open gaps. They brought in a couple guys from Georgia, from Coastal Carolina, who should be an impactful, like, key players. I think his name was Austin something Blask. But yeah, and that should really help because Omari and Hampton is a top tier running back on the same level as Ollie Gordon, on the same level as Taj Brooks. So if you can get that run game to solidify, it'll open up passing areas. And so honestly, if it was my list, I know me and Kieran, we have to come to a consensus on this. I'd have them pushing contenders, but I think Kieran and I got it right in putting them right below in spoilers.
Yep. All right, so Virginia, a football program that has had a lot of issues recently. Very, very unfortunate. But they're pitiful, unfortunately. They've lost so much talent in various ways, and their program is hurting right now. It will take years for Virginia to recover. They're always going to have a bit of a tough go of it, I think, just due to the nature of their situation, but especially in light of recent events. Hopefully, Virginia will be able to get back to their winning ways, but I don't think it's this year. I think they've got to be with Stanford and Pitt.
Yeah. Virginia always struggles. I mean, they just really haven't gotten their big break yet. They looked promising 2 years ago that they were going to do better, but clearly not. I don't think they're better than Virginia Tech, the Hokies. I think the Hokies still have them this year too in their rivalry. Just not a good team. But I feel like out of the bottom, out of the pitiful teams, they have probably the highest chance of making it to the middle pack the soonest. I really truly believe in both their offense and defense to produce well. And so for that reason, we're gonna have to put them in pitiful, but they have the highest chance of getting out, in my opinion.
Yeah, so next up is Virginia Tech. Again, another spoiler team. They're dangerous. That inner Sandman will get you. I think they got to be in spoilers. Really, nothing more than that. The roster is solid, but they still have work to do to build up towards the sharper end of the ACC.
Yeah, same thing that Kieran said. Basically, I don't want to just repeat and regurgitate what you just said, but they are I think they're a stronger team than Virginia, and that's kind of how I'm basing this off of. Like I said, I'm going off of the other teams. I don't think you're at the same level as maybe the spoilers, Uptick, and Champions League. But in the pitiful, I do think that if you played any of the teams in the pitiful category, you will be able to beat them by double digits, whether that is home or away. I feel confident in your game enough. So I would say and agree with Kieran in the fact that you belong in the middle of the pack.
Yeah.
Alrighty, moving on, we have Wake Forest. Kieran, what do we think about these guys?
Yeah, so they're unfortunately going to round off the pitiful tier. I remember when Wake Forest had some good seasons. That was peak football. I was a big Demon Deacons fan, still am at heart. I do love some of these ACC teams. Unfortunately, I don't think they're going to make it towards the sharper end of the conference. but there is always a chance, and I think a bowl would be really impressive for them. So that's why we've got them down and unfortunately in the bottom tier. But I also think they are very much on the edge and could make a leap out.
Yeah, they also have a really tough schedule. They have to play teams like Ole Miss. Believe that they're probably gonna have to face off against Clemson again. I do remember there was like a good span where Kieran's right. Wake Forest was making waves in the ACC, pushing these top tier teams, but as of right now, it doesn't look promising. It's gonna look like it's a rocky road ahead. Not much else to really say about their game. I mean, if you can be carried by Desmond Caliborn, that's gonna be a great thing. He'll be your offensive outstanding player. I don't know what's really gonna happen. Your schedule, I'll pull it up on screen if I get my animations to work. But it really looks like at best you're gonna go 6-6. But that's all right. That's good enough to make a bowl game. Make a bowl game. Get your head coach another year to work with you, and you'll do better. Just it's gonna take a while. Alrighty, and then lastly, we have our honorable ACC team, the only team that is actually independent on this roster or on this tier list, but basically play all of ACC football. So, Kieran, why do we think Notre Dame is somewhere between here and here? And for this Notre Dame, guys, we're just going to say that Notre Dame is sitting on their own. So, Kieran, let's just say this is 0 wins, 5 wins, 7 wins, 9 wins, 10 plus.
I think they've got to be in 10 plus then. I think that's what they are. Obviously, not an ACC team, but we have to talk Notre Dame football. They've got in QB Riley Leonard. Their defense is looking really stout, especially at linebacker and in that secondary. They lose big players, but they've bought another 1 year extension on a quarterback, and hopefully it'll work out a little bit better than it did with Football Jesus last year.
Yeah. And honestly, I didn't even think Football Jesus was half that bad. Sam Hartman really played well. I don't understand the reason why Notre Dame is doing these last year make it big quarterbacks like they're doing with Riley Leonard taking him out of Kansas State. But it's everything, man. Notre Dame, you have the easiest road. What?
Riley Leonard played at Duke.
Oh shoot, who am I thinking of? I'm thinking of someone who played
You're
at Kansas.
thinking of the new
Will
Ohio
I'm thinking
State
of Will.
quarterback.
I'm
There
thinking
you
about Will.
go.
My bad. Yeah, taking Riley Leonard from Duke, famous meme guy who basically said, "Please let me turn my paper in 20 minutes late." Anyways, let's get off him. Notre Dame is up here because it's Notre Dame. They have the easiest road in. I think we can both agree to making the playoffs and the fact that they play independent football. No bowl or they don't need to play in any of these conference champion games. Nothing to put themselves in jeopardy. But they do have an amazing team. They have all the prestige going their way. It's Notre Dame football. It's the Fighting Irish. What isn't there to love? So yeah, 10
A
plus
lot,
wins,
actually.
making playoffs. Yeah, I
But
mean
yeah,
they are hated, but Notre Dame UNC would be really fire to watch if they play each other. Um, but yeah, this rounds off our tier list. You have your champions plus Notre Dame. You have your contenders who are going to make a push for that trophy, but just probably will fall up short. You got your spoilers who might actually spoil one of the guys above them season. Maybe Georgia Tech does it to Miami again. Maybe UNC pulls a blinder. Who knows? We got your middle of the pack teams. You got SMU, Duke, Boston College, SVT, and Cal. You got You got SMU, D, BC, SVT, and Cal. And then in the pit IFL, you have Pitt, and then you have the rest of the IFLs. So, anyways,
yeah. So one thing I'd like to point out is if y'all will go back to the SEC video though we did last week in the SEC podcast, their pyramid, the SEC, if you look at the distribution, the pyramid, it's more of like that, right? Like it fans out a little bit at the bottom, but it even goes in. It's kind of more like almost like a carrot shape, right?
yeah,
And this is somewhat like a carrot shape, but it tapers so much more at the top. It's almost like that, right? Like
yeah,
it tapers. And that shows you how elite the SEC is, even in that little difference, that slight difference, that really the ACC has 4 teams that can contend for the title. The SEC has at least 6, right? 5,
mhm,
6. Maybe even you could push it to 7, depending on how the ball bounces. And I don't see that many teams being able to contend for the title, or there would be more teams and contenders. And that really shows you what the difference is in play
Talent,
and the caliber
play,
of the
everything,
conference. Yeah.
everything, and that's why SEC is considered probably the most prestigious conference now, and the most, I mean, affordable conference, if you know what I'm talking about, making all the money. Anyways, that is it for this portion of the episode. We're about to get into the accolades.
Yeah. So first, we're going to talk some impact players. So I'm going to champion the players that I love. Kirtan's going to take the players that he loves. We're going to split it up, do a little mix and match, get fun with it. So the first player I've got for y'all is Ruben Bain, the defensive end for Miami. So last year, his production, it left a little to be desired, but he was still a solid weapon. He had 44 tackles, 14 and a half of those were for a loss. He had 7.5 sacks and 3 forced fumbles. So that is a solid season from a defensive end. And if he could take a step up and really wreak some more havoc on quarterbacks like DJ Uyunglele and Cade Klubnik, he has a chance to be the premier pass rusher in the league and really make a difference for his Miami team. He's very big, quite long, but also has really a solid defensive end build. He's got that length. He has that elite bend that you need to get around. And watching him rush the passer, when he's able to be on his top game, it really is special. And he is certainly one of the premier players on the defensive side of the ball for Miami.
Yep. Next up, I have DJ Uyunglele. As mentioned multiple times this episode, he's got a chip on his shoulder now. He went from ACC football, playing actually not horribly bad, but he did get benched for Cade Klubnik due to a series of unfortunate games, and then what ended up being a really pitiful drive. I'm going to use that word all the rest of this episode because I love it so much. He then transferred into Oregon State, where he actually played very well, like surprisingly well. It took the team to being, I believe, at highest 19 in the country, rivaled all these other Pac-12 teams that came their way, including going into a tight one, I believe, against Washington. Um, and now he's back. He's got vengeance. He is ready for the rematch with Clemson, and now he's got a chip on his shoulder. If DJ can play the way he did at Oregon State, if he can throw first and then think, if he just does not put his head, if he doesn't let the mental part of the game affect him, he's going to be such a big piece in the puzzle for Florida State winning the entire ACC. And so that's why he has to be one of these impact players.
Yeah. So I have Amarian Hampton, and he could make a very big difference for his team. But first, we're going to dive into some stats. I'm going to talk about what I think he could do this year. So last year, he had 253 carries for 1,504 yards, 16 touchdowns, won it through the air, 5.9 yard average. But I think what is most important to notice, and the stat I want to draw your attention to, what I am seeing, I'm not entirely sure this is correct, but if I believe it is, and if it's not, blame ESPN, not me. He has not fumbled in the past 2 years once. That is almost 2,000 yards, over 300 rushing attempts, more than 20 touchdowns, and you add in another 29 receptions for 222 yards, and he hasn't fumbled once. That kind of security is elite. He is the premier running back in the league this year, I believe. And if he can elevate, if he can make that go from a 5.9 average long rush to a little longer, stretch it out to a 6.5 average rush, that could be huge for them. And he's explosive, he's dynamic, and he has a really great just vision and being able to find that window even when the O-line is collapsing. He's been good at breaking tackles, and he's just been able to make it happen, man. And if he can add a couple more touchdowns and take over, elite player.
Exactly. And we both have an agreement that Amarian Hampton is going to be one of the premier players. Anyways, let me get into a reason why Virginia Tech isn't looking as bad as their counterparts Virginia. And that is mainly due to a guy named Kyron Jones. like Kieran says, we're going to shoot you with some stats first. So Kyron Jones in 2022, he only got around 23 snaps in, but last year he really took it up a notch. Last year he was completing 166 passes for like 60% completion and has 17 touchdowns and only 3 interceptions. Now, you might not say that's a lot, but considering the competition that they've been going up against, he's been really playing to his heart's content. He's thrown over 2,000 passing yards this last season. Again, not the most we've seen, but not the least. And the big part I want to keep y'all like interested in and noted about is that he is a dual threat quarterback, which a lot of people really sleep on. He was able to scramble for a lot of yards. Let's see here. Rushing, he was able to scramble for over 818 yards last season. All of those on just carries, on just evading the pocket. He is a very well dual threat quarterback coming straight from Baylor. Um, he had 5 touchdowns on the run, over 166 carries as a quarterback. And on most of the big win games that they had against Boston College, against all these other teams, he was rushing for 20 carries, almost more than their running back in these games, and he was just taking himself, throwing up 166 yards. I mean, just talk about someone who is able to be efficient on both ends of the ball. It's just remarkable. And I think if he's going to play like Lamar Jackson is, then if the NFL can't stop Lamar Jackson, how is the ACC going to fare against Kyron Jones? I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah. So next, I got a player you have almost certainly never heard of before, unless you're a Syracuse fan, and that's Marlowe Wax. He's a very, very good linebacker who had a breakout season last year. He had 108 total tackles, 74 of which were solo tackles. He also racked up 4 sacks and 4 forced fumbles. So this is solid play out of a linebacker. He made the tackles in the middle of the field. He was able to get to the ball, fly to the ball, and even in some cases punch that ball out. And that was a solid year. If he plays well as a counterpart to Kyle McCord on that defensive side of the football, it could be huge for Syracuse. They could have a great season. Again, their schedule, it's a pansy schedule, let's be honest. And if he racks up that many tackles and is maybe able to tack on a couple more interceptions or forced fumbles, they could have what really is an amazing year and defensively, and he could be a very, very good linebacker to be looking at when the draft rolls around in April.
Yeah. And let's just keep it on the defense. So, a guy that you should have heard of, especially now after what his team was able to do last season, Patrick Payton. He is one of the Florida State's defensive linemen, and he wreaks havoc, especially online. This guy's 6'5", 254 pounds, just a big boy. And so let's get into what he's done. So he's been at Florida State for both years, and last year he had 43 total tackles, 28 of which were solo. Now that is just impressive on its own that most of his tackles came from just solo hits, but he's also had many losses. He's had many passes deflected. He plays both. His linebacker position is just so well played. I mean, this guy he's just such a like threat on both sides. Like he is, how would we put him? Fred Warner, essentially. I would say he's almost on the same level as Fred Warner. Not actually play, but he plays like the same level as Fred Warner. Great player. He had 7 sacks last year, 2 forced fumbles. And by Fred Warner, I want to clarify, I just mean like, if Fred Warner was a bad thing. Fred Warner is a linebacker. I don't want anyone to get confused with that analogy. And this guy's a defensive lineman. So think of it as Aaron Donald type. He just wreaks havoc all over. 7 tackles and 2 forced fumbles last season is absurd. And just expect him to get better and better as the season progresses this year. And his stats line is just going to be more and more insane. So that's Patrick Payton for you. Impact player for the FSU Seminoles.
Yeah, so I've got Kyle McCord, again, transferred from Ohio State to Syracuse. Last year, when I look at the stats, it's not that bad. If you show me the stat line, I wouldn't think it's Kyle McCord, right? 65% completion percentage, 3,170 yards, which is pretty good. 24 TDs and 6 interceptions, which is a pretty good TD to INT ratio. He did take 16 sacks, which is unfortunate, but he's been pretty solid. And he had his issues in big games. He made a lot of mistakes. His balls were never really where they should be. Marvin Harrison Jr. definitely made him look a little bit better. He If he takes a step forward with having his receivers or his receiving core certainly be a step down from what it was last year, I think that would be a big improvement for him, and it could be a big improvement in Syracuse's record as well.
Yeah. And lastly, I got the newest addition to Clemson, and probably the biggest one, most impactful. This is the freshman coming in, Brian Wesco. Now, for those of you who don't know who Brian Wesco is, he is a freshman coming in this year. He comes from Midlothian, Texas. And what you need to know about him is this guy's 6'2". He's a very lanky player, very slim. But his thing is that he is so fast. This guy has a essential sixth gear that he can tap into whenever needed. He can create late separation on the ball. Just expect him to be your potential and future wide receiver one come next season because, I mean, he's just going to be very, very good. Um, and what else can I say about him? He tests very well in every single statistic. He was one of the top athletes in the 40, the shuttle, his high vert, all of it. I mean, this guy is just a freak athlete and expect him to go a long, long way, especially come next season.
Yeah. So now we're going to move on, wrap up the show a little bit with who we think is going to be the coach of the year and the player of the year. Now, these are my coach of the year and player of the year predictions. I am high on Miami. So obviously the coach of the year has to be Mario Cristobal. I think he'll get it done. It's hard for me to see a world in which Miami does bad this year. Certainly it exists, but I think they're going to do great. I think they've got the skill, the talent, and the coaching to take it up just that level and be a top contender. And I think if they do it, Mario Cristobal, great year coaching the Canes. Now, the impact player for me is also a Miami player. I haven't mentioned him yet, but Cameron Ward. I think if he takes another step up from his production at Washington State, that would be huge. He was good there, almost 4,000 passing yards, had a little bit of some struggles with completion percentage, but that should improve as he has a better O-line and doesn't have to play in as tough of a conference, I would say. And I think he's really, really poised to be one of the best quarterbacks in college football. Definitely a Heisman front runner. And you just watch him play, and he's so electric on all those sides of the ball, getting it, attacking the defense in every way possible. That's why I think he is the impact player.
Yep. And I would see this is where we're gonna differ a little bit. So Kieran is very high on Miami, as he should be. I mean, Miami is going to be a very talented team. I think everyone sees that coming. But I am a big fan of these new incoming coaches that came from Texas A&M, like we said with Mike Elko, and now I'm gonna go the same with Manny Diaz for Duke. A new coach, a new step up. I'm expecting big things. I think that he can take a lackluster team, give it a new quarterback, give it a new system, revitalize it a little bit, and just bring a whole new energy to Duke offense. I mean, we saw what happened in a couple of their games. They were electric, and I feel like they can tap back into that energy all the time. They have the fan base to do it. Everyone wants to pull up. I mean, Duke basketball, we understand it pays the bills. It gets everyone there, but Duke football should not be slept on. It's going to be a very, very good competitor in the ACC, so don't sleep on them. So Manny Diaz, he's going to make big shots. He's going to be your coach of the year. And for impact player of the year, we both had the exact same guy anyways. Cam Ward, I spoke so highly on Kyron Drones for his dual threat capabilities that I was hoping no one would catch Cam Ward as the exact same abilities. Cam Ward came from Washington State, is a very electric player, can both scramble and throw the ball. I mean, you gotta love this kid. He's going to be absolutely insane, and big things are to come, especially for Miami. So, Miami, we're gonna hold you to a high standard. Just make sure you can convert for us.
Yeah. So that is a wrap on our ACC deep dive. But we do still have bold predictions, and they have to be ACC related. I'm going to go first. I'm going to take the punt. We're going to get after it. And I'm going with Boston College goes bowling, which may not seem bold, but the win total is 4.5. And I think they might struggle to make it to 5. I highly doubt 6, but we're backing them. We are going with it, man. Boston College makes a bowl.
Yep. And for my bold prediction for this ACC edition, I'm going to go with SMU being one of the most slept on teams. And I'm going to say SMU, okay, we can put them at the middle of the pack, but they're going to be pushing the contenders area. They're going to be making a push for the ACC. First time showing up, showing out. And I honestly think they're going to finish in the spoilers, past the spoilers, actually. They're going to be all the way up past Georgia Tech, past NC State, past Louisville. Just watch.
So SMU finishes better than Louisville in the
Yep.
ACC. That is a spicy one, ladies and gentlemen. And on that note, another spicy one. Dave Campbell's Texas Football, I am calling you out with what little football media coverage I can. Please do not put CJ Baxter as the 5th best running back in Texas. That is absolutely unacceptable.
Wow.
And I hope you know that you need to do better.
Yep.
And on that sombering note, I'm afraid it is time to end this episode. Thank you for watching if you even still are. Please subscribe. We need to get those numbers up, man. If people would take us seriously, the content we can make for y'all. It is free, and you are an absolute hero if you hit that like, subscribe, keep it with it, stay here, stay locked in for the content. And let's take this beyond the snap train as far as it can go, guys.
Yep. Rumor has it if you subscribe and then in the next 20 seconds that you're watching this video, you will win the lottery one day. I'm just saying. I was told that from a higher up. Maybe it was our producer. Maybe it was just me making that up because I had nothing else to say. We'll see. Anyways, that has been it for this episode of the Beyond the Snap podcast. Please like, subscribe. Again, like I said, lottery question mark, question mark. Anyways, peace.
See, how can you afford not to take that chance, man? How can you
Exactly.
afford not to? Peace.
Trust me. Trust me. Go subscribe and then go immediately to your local 7-Eleven and go buy a lottery ticket. Tell me if you're a winner or not. Peace.